Filming Italy, il cinema incontra l'arte, siamo qui in questo posto meraviglioso all'Ara Pacis, sono molto contenta, ringrazio il Ministero della Cultura, ringrazio il Comune di Roma, ringrazio la Sovrintendenza, ringrazio Zetema, ringrazio la Regione Lazio, veramente tutti quelli che hanno reso possibile di realizzare il Filming Italy, il cinema incontra l'arte in questo luogo meraviglioso. Oggi siamo con un'attrice bravissima che tutti gli studenti amano moltissimo per tanti ruoli che ha sempre fatto. Voglio dare il benvenuto, il welcome a Carla Gugino e poi voglio ringraziare diciamo, il nostro moderatore, giornalista, vicepresidente di Variety che terrà anche questa conversazione masterclass. I would like to thank you, Steven Gados. E quindi grazie veramente ragazzi, tutti gli studenti, because we go with this interview on the metaverso. And for that reason, it's very special things because we are in the really antique museum and we go in the most modern world.
Yes.
You know, we like this contrast. For that reason, we did this art and cinema together. But now, Steve,
thank you
it's
so
up to
much,
you.
Tiziana. Thank you for having us here, this opportunity to talk with a great actress I admire so much. And I like to think that Augustus is very happy about us being here.
I feel very honored to be in
He had
his
a
shadow.
tough life. There was a lot of strife in his time.
Yes,
and
indeed.
It must be fun to listen to actors talk about
Speak
making movies.
Exactly, about drama.
So they're here. The spirits are here. I just read a fantastic brand new profile about you, Carla, in Vanity Fair. And but as a journalist, you know, you're always looking for what's the question that the fantastic gentleman who wrote this piece, he did miss one question for
Ooh,
me.
Yeah.
And that was, when did your fearlessness begin? Because your career is characterized by, I think, a real gusto and fearlessness and willingness to take on things. He's very good at describing a lot of them, the Mike Flanagan partnership and the universe and the dynamic range of roles, and even going back to Spy Kids, willing to take on something that was not age appropriate in a funny way and saying, I'm going to do it. But do you think your fearlessness preceded your acting career, or did it develop along the way?
I do think it preceded it. I had an unusual childhood. My parents separated when I was very young. They remained friends with each other, so the separation wasn't really traumatic, but I had a very sort of disparate. I lived along the coast of California. I lived in a teepee. You know, we had sort of unusual. I had an unusual childhood in that sense, and I also then, with my father, came and had the great fortune to come to cities like Rome, very young age, and also boldly try. I started eating escargot at 7. You know, so I think there was this sort of lust for life that carried through in that way. I also had a very serious kidney operation that they thought I might die when I was 4. So there was just a lot of, I think there was something about the preciousness of life that I got when I was very young. And I would say that one thing that really, it was how much I fell in love with acting that made me want to do anything to be able to do it. And so I guess, you know, there was a certain element of fearlessness in that. When I was 13, 14, I started modeling a little bit in New York, and I was recruited by Elite Petite because I'm short. And I was really interested in fashion and photography, and more so than modeling. But my aunt, Carol Merrill, was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I called her. We were very close, and I said, I don't want to give up on anything, but I don't think this is for me. And she said, come and try this acting class that I think you might really love. And from the moment that I did my first scene in it, and I had done a little bit of acting in school, I just said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Which acting classes were
It
these?
was a man named Gene Bua, and he was in the Valley in Los Angeles. He's no longer with us, but he was extraordinary. He was also a bit of a spiritual teacher in a way, I guess, as any good acting coach is. It was making me think when I was hearing Dolph Lundgren's interview and he was talking about Larry Moss, there are very few. Howard Fine is a wonderful acting coach who I've worked with, and many people over the years, but Gene was someone who I think saw something in me that I didn't know yet that I had. And as you know, it always just takes one person to do that.
Absolutely.
So I do think that I did what people called courageous at the time that I didn't understand was courageous then, because I just was so single-minded about what I wanted to do.
And really, this class that Carol steered you toward at an early age, it uncapped, it unlocked something that was there for you.
For sure.
And it was like, boom.
Yeah, and it was. And I think for me, I was a very good student. I was extremely serious. I had a lot of sort of chaos in my childhood, and I was the one who kind of held the line somehow. I think I grew up very quickly. And this was a moment that I remember the thought, having the thought in that moment, oh, I get to lose control in a controlled environment.
Wow. Yeah.
So
yeah.
there was something about the
Career.
safety of knowing, exactly,
If
of
I can
knowing
make
that
money at
that was
this,
my
it's
job.
going to be great.
Exactly.
So Carol and Bernie Sapphire,
Yeah.
she was married to for
Yeah.
a while. It's really funny, reading your life, because it's like, I was in Malibu in the early 70s.
Right.
And a friend of mine was building Bernie's restaurant.
No way.
Back then. Yeah, I'm reading this. It's like this old home week. But, I was reading your about your youth, and I'm thinking, it sounds chaotic. On the other hand, growing up in Sarasota and Big Sur,
Yeah.
they're not the worst places to be a child, right?
No, definitely. That small world is amazing. I lived also I rented a room from Bernie at one point as I was
In Malibu, or?
in Malibu in Big Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the moment when I was trying to figure out if I could support myself acting. So it was a very significant time, actually. But yes, I really do. I think both of my parents, my father's an orthodontist, he loves sort of the beauty, and my mom has always been obsessed with nature, and so I think I was introduced to a real appreciation of beauty
What a
early
great
on.
balance,
Yeah.
because, by the way, the teepee also is like something from 25 years before you were born. It's fantastic that it was still going on.
I know.
Because I associate with my hippie youth.
Yeah,
which
but
is
it was, it was the 70s, so
Yeah.
it was definitely, yeah.
And in terms of fearlessness, I think anyone who's not an actor, of course, everything about acting terrifies all of us who are not actors, but nothing seems more terrifying than Broadway stage. And you've tackled that and done brilliantly there. One actor that I saw that you had worked with that I think is one of those great underrated, fantastic fellows, not with us anymore, is Brian Dennehy. Would you tell us anything about working with Brian, or what made him a first-rate actor in your view?
Yeah, of course. He is truly one of the most grounding forces I've ever been around. And that's very significant on the stage, because in my first play on Broadway, when I did After the Fall, and it was terrifying to me. I knew how to act. I was very, proficient in that regard. But in regards to knowing what night of the week, the audience was this way, or knowing that, in the orchestra under the mezzanine is the worst place to hear anything. So you're really trying to help them out more than you are anybody else. Various things like that I learned along the way. I was terrified. I'd never experienced this kind of feeling before going on stage that was like, I'm going to leave my body. I'm actually going to leave. And I might not step onto that stage. It was a kind of fear I had never quite experienced before. So working with Brian was this incredibly grounding force. And he was, first of all, he and Robert Falls had collaborated on a lot of Eugene O'Neill in the past. Death of a Salesman, The Long Day's Journey into Night. They worked on many plays together. And so they were sort of like a married couple in a way. They got in arguments together, and then creative fights, and then of course, made up, and it was a fascinating process to watch. We also did, and I really, really loved working with both of them. We also did so much table work on that play. We started in Chicago at the Goodman, which Bob Falls was the artistic director of, and then we moved to Broadway. And so he has also a patience. Brian said to me, you never get good until you've done a play for 2 years.
Wow.
Which is an kind of patience that I don't know how, But the other thing that was one of the most extraordinary things, again, because he doesn't suffer fools, and he would read a novel a day somehow while we were doing the play. It was extraordinary to me. But he said, when we moved to Broadway, he said, I agreed to do this move to Broadway because you deserve a Tony for this role. And
Wow.
it still
Jeez.
moves me so
Yeah.
tremendously to even say it, because that kind of, it was just, he said it so simply.
Yeah.
And it ultimately ended up being a short-lived production. We were in a far too big a theater for our play, and it got very good reviews, but it was short-lived. But that, for me, counted as much as anything else would have.
You know, there's that saying, there are no small parts. I'm remembering the first time Brian Dennehy got onto my radar. My director pal and I think it was 10. I know it was a Blake Edwards movie. We played a bartender. Small role.
Yeah.
And both of us came away from the movie, you know, loving Bo
Right.
and loving Dudley. And
Yeah.
the great movie. But who was that guy?
Yeah.
And talking about ONeal, Brian Dennehy was like put on earth to be an ONeal actor, you know.
Absolutely.
Because he's got it all.
Oh,
you know.
yeah, absolutely.
But he sure believed in you.
He really did. He
Wow,
really did.
fantastic.
I do feel that along the way I've had some people that I have respected and admired so tremendously that have given me that vote of confidence that, has made a big difference for me.
It's an easy guess, but I would guess that Mike Flanagan is on that list. He's kind of your Joseph von Sternberg. You know?
Yeah, he has been. He really has been. It's been such a wonderful collaboration, and I think all of my favorite directors. Certainly Sebastian Gutierrez, who's here with us tonight, Mike Flanagan. Actually, Robert Rodriguez did it with me as well in terms of playing the mom in Spy Kids
Sure.
and playing the lesbian parole officer in Sin City. I'm so appreciative when directors know a transformative actor when they see one, and someone who's just interested in that. You know, for me, and I think it really did, and you spoke about that Vanity Fair article, but I think it did confuse people for a long time because they couldn't sort of put me into one. Thankfully, not someone like you, and people who sort of look at it from a different perspective, but it really, Mike Flanagan has been an absolute champion of every time he's given me a new piece of material. It's been something that scares me in the best way.
Yeah.
And that is very different than what I've done before with him. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, it's staying fresh because you can't say, well, we did that already.
Yeah.
It's a whole new
Exactly.
universe. Some of the directors you've worked with, Ridley Scott, Brian De Palma, and in a little tiny thing, I noticed you worked with John Milius.
Yes.
Early on.
Yes.
Was Milius is a mythical character.
Yeah,
He's still with us,
yeah,
thankfully. Was he? Did you know anything of the Milius reputation when you did that, or?
I was so young, Motorcycle Gang. With Jake Busey, and it was a great, very fun and interesting job for me. I mean, it's actually where I sort of shot a gun for the first time because Milius always had a gun on him, on his ankle, and or at least at that time in that production. And so a lot of the crew and Teamsters would be, out in the early mornings in the desert where we were shooting, sort of target practice. And I did recognize in that moment, oh wow, having a gun in your hand is an extremely powerful thing, and it gave me a larger understanding of it, actually, in a way that because I hadn't been raised with that. He was tough. He was lovely. He definitely seemed extremely formidable. But no, I don't think I understood the context that I have now.
Yeah, I didn't even understand it. I'm like I say, the generation I'm from, and remember, when I was a young Warren Oates fan, he made Dillinger.
Yeah, no.
That's like in the early '70s. But it wasn't until Big Lebowski,
right,
where you have John Goodman channeling.
Exactly.
And you go, oh, that's that guy. Everybody's onto this guy.
No, totally. He was such a. And De Palma, I did know. When I did Snake Eyes, I was a big De Palma fan, and there was a moment where I was in a white suit with a blonde wig and blood splattered all over me. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, I'm in a Brian De Palma movie.
No mistaking it.
No. Yes, and Ridley Scott was an extraordinary experience because I got that job just with him looking at my reel. I never met Ridley before. I didn't audition for it, so I kind of couldn't believe it. I mean, as you know, in an actor's career, that rarely happens. And I showed up on set, and we had the best time. And I had known Russell a little bit before, though we had never worked together, and that was a really fun and dynamic, and they had a very dynamic relationship with each other, and again, a lot of history. But he gave me a very simple direction that was one of the best directions, and a perfect direction in the moment. It's a scene where I play the ex-wife. We're in court together, and I'm extremely angry at being betrayed, and I wanted to do it so well, and I wanted to sort of show Ridley what I could do. I suppose I wasn't thinking any of these things at the time, but and I did the first take, and he came up and he just put his hand on my knee and he said, "You don't need any special sauce."
Really?
Yeah, it was just like,
that's nice.
What you got is just enough,
Yeah.
And then I just did another take and was able to be extremely present.
That's a great direction. Yeah. Another movie that you did, I think it's interesting because you caught De Niro midlife and Leo DiCaprio when he was just hatched.
Yeah.
And can you say anything about that experience of that movie? It was Michael Caton Jones, I believe.
Correct. Yeah. Can we swear or we can't? I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe we'll do an effing.
Yeah. So no. Well, I had gotten that job from an audition on tape, and so Michael Caton Jones had just said the first direction I got was, "You better be effing good."
Okay.
So I was terrified. So that's where I started.
Yeah.
It was my first big job away. We shot it in Vancouver. And so that was, I was really, Bob De Niro was an absolute pro and gentleman, and I really learned a lot. There was a take that we did, because, it obviously wasn't digital, it was film at the time, and we were all sitting around the dining room table in the scene, and he was doing a monologue, and he was doing it over and over again, and he was trying different things in each one, and then at the end of they cut, and he looked at Michael, and he said, the beginning part of 2, the end of 3, like he had actually already edited it in his mind. And at that time for me, as an actor, I thought, oh, but you have to get it all right, all in one. You have to do, and sort of it was a really wonderfully informative thing about the art of filmmaking.
Nice teacher.
Exactly, a great teacher. And Leo was, he was a baby. I mean, he was on his dirt bike, and at one point I remember we had to stop shooting for a few days because he fell off his dirt bike and sort of injured himself. But he was already doing incredible work.
Was Gilbert Grape before Boy's Life or after?
Gilbert Grape was right after.
After, yeah.
It was right after. And then I did a movie with Bob and Al Pacino years later that John Avnet directed. And so it was kind of an amazing moment when we hadn't kept in touch really, but we saw each other and it was a joke that only in Hollywood would I play the daughter, and then I played a lover. I was a young lover, albeit, but still we were cops all together. So in a movie called Righteous Kill. But yeah, no, This Boy's Life was the first thing that I got that felt reflective of what I wanted my career to be.
And I don't know if you have recollections of it. My recollection is, having had a tough dad, watching a movie. There's another one called Great Santini with Duvall, where these are the two movies where the tough dad from hell, but Leo really had to really get beat up emotionally by this De Niro character, and he was a kid. Do you remember being there for any of those scenes or for what they were doing? There's an intensity to the movie. Was it intense for you to be part of that?
It was an intense environment, but not because of Bob De Niro was so. There was a great kind of mentorship happening there, and there was such professionalism. So in that way, and Leo has always been seemed to me kind of an old soul, and so somehow that there never felt like, and there are those environments when you're on sets where you're like, this is not okay, and this young person doesn't understand this, and it's the lines are being crossed, and that wasn't the case at all in that particular.
Even though the subject matter was the subject matter was intense, but the professionalism and the camaraderie made it okay.
made it okay. Yeah, exactly.
I can't remember where I saw this, but it was reminding me, I think I have to go back to this actual episode of Entourage because, you know, you got to play an agent.
Right.
And you got to kick the butt of the super agent named after the biggest, you know, mofo super agent in town, Ari Gold.
Talk about like meta.
Yeah,
Hollywood,
meta. Did you call upon any of your experiences in dealing with agents or agencies in crafting that character?
For sure. They'll remain nameless, but there were two female agents, actually, who are wonderful agents and still agents, who really influenced me for this character. And I think that what was clear when Doug Allen came to me with it, they had just written the first episode of that character, and I was doing Night at the Museum up in Vancouver at the time, and so they said, would you do this? I read the script and was immediately said, I want to play Amanda Daniels. She is, also because there was no other character like her in Entourage. Yeah. There were a lot of really strong female characters, but she was such...
completely unique, yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that she was just so no-nonsense, and so the whole catch, though, was that I would be able to have time to prepare for the role and, you know, have some time to meet people and talk to them. But that one scene that I had to come down and shoot immediately from Vancouver, come down for a day and go back up, was at a Lakers game. And it was the scene where we're you know, sitting on the floor, and I've basically, you know, sort of gotten the seats, like the best seats, and I've sort of
Ari'd,
exactly,
the Lou Adler seats.
Exactly. And I just remember that was such a surreal day because I didn't know how that show shot almost like a reality show in terms of the camera work and everything, and that's why I think it feels so kind of that way to people. And by the way, it's being discovered by an entirely new generation. I mean, so many 18-year-olds come up to me now obsessed with the show.
Yeah.
But I just remember I was just watching Kobe. Like I was like, how do I act? And because they were playing while we were filming. There was no let's stop playing while filming, and I can't believe they let us do that.
Yeah.
But it was one of the most, you know, an exercise in focus. For sure.
Yeah. Big HBO juice to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know which episode it is for your character, but I was reading up and reminded of this fantastic moment where you say to Ari Gold, I'll walk you to your car. This town ain't safe for bitches.
Right.
That is the coldest. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I had a lot of lines like that I would never say, that Carla would never say. It would never even, you know, so those are those fun moments though where, that's the amazing thing about acting. It really has been for me, you know, the majority of my life, and I feel so passionately about it. And that passion only grows. But what I will say is that it's so wonderful when you get to play characters that that you are so different from yourself. I mean, sometimes we play characters, obviously, that have an innate connection that are similar. But she was just a blast for
Somebody
that reason.
Fun to parachute in and be here for a while.
Exactly.
Then the last thing, I want to make sure that I'm reading Variety and we're telling the truth and it's correct. The Florist is happening?
Yes, that is true.
Is it? Where are you in the process?
I'm extremely excited about it. We will begin shooting in just a few months, and we've been doing some. The script is now. We've been able to actually have the time to work on this script. It's a beautiful script. Obviously, playing Vivian Lee is incredibly daunting, but I feel extremely excited about where we're at with it. And it takes place in 1966 in a real chapter of her life in Philadelphia, when she and John Gielgud went and did Ivanov, Chekhov's first play, and she was bipolar and in shock therapy, and so it's. But it has, it's been very important to me. She was also incredibly funny. She was one of the most extraordinary hostesses. She, you know, in terms of people would come, you know, cross borders to get to their parties. And so I wanted to make sure that we really see her vitality, even as she is going through what's an extremely hard chapter in her life. I had the great fortune of playing Maggie in After the Fall when Arthur Miller was still alive and with us. During rehearsals and things, and that was incredibly daunting for similar reasons. And I think one thing that I hope in if I'm able to pull off, if I do my job right, we will get to see the complexity of
Yes.
everybody's life. You know,
Yeah, the Vivian Lee story is just complexity upon complexity.
It really is.
From the beginning, you know, when she was at her peak, playing Blanche,
Yeah.
you know, is her in some ways the fragility. Nobody talked about bipolar in 1950,
No.
you know, but Blanche was probably
Yeah,
bipolar.
yeah.
And all of it. Well, it's a pleasure to talk. I want to leave you with one thing that I'll bet no one has pointed out to you. Did you know that one of your videos has reached the 1 billion view landmark?
You know,
Did you know this already?
But so recently,
Okay.
Drew Barrymore beat you to it, only because I just did her show.
I like being beat by the best.
Exactly, right? And I had no idea, and I would have not known. You would have been the one who revealed it to me, but I guess John Bon Jovi had posted that day that Always had hit that billion
That's
views
why,
mark.
and it's such a snapshot. You know, when we go back and look at 80s and 90s and stuff, it is like a scrapbook of childhood.
Yeah.
You know?
No,
it was
it
a
really
different
is.
time. There were different hairdos.
There were.
But you know, you were stunning then. You're stunning now. You'll be
Thank
stunning
you.
forever. And it's just a great pleasure of mine to get a chance to talk with you.
Thank you. Likewise, it's so wonderful to see you again, and in this incredible environment. I just
best.
feel so blessed. Yeah.
Thanks to Filming Italy, to Tiziano Rocca, and everyone on the crew. Thank you for all your hard work. This is a wrap.
Indeed. Many thanks. Yeah.